A party meant to honor me became a coronation for my enemy. My husband, the man I built an empire with, handed the keys to our kingdom to another woman right before my eyes. He thought he stripped me of everything that night. He was wrong. He didn't just take from me. He created his most terrifying weapon. My name is Alara Vance. Tonight, I am 40 years old. The air in the Seattle Museum of Modern Art is chilled to a precise 68 degrees, smelling faintly of champagne and industrial polish. This is my birthday party, but the guest list is 90% Vance Dynamics stakeholders and 10% press. This isn't a celebration. It's a meticulously planned public relations event. As the Chief Operating Officer of Vance Dynamics, our city's leading data analytics firm, I planned it myself. Across the grand hall, standing beneath an imposing sculpture of suspended glass, my husband holds court, Julian Vance, our CEO. He is all charisma, a flash of white teeth and perfectly tousled hair, charming a circle of venture capitalists. He is the sun. We are all just meant to orbit and reflect his light. He is the face of the company. I am the one who builds the engine, who calibrates the code, who actually makes it run. And then, there is the hawk. On the mezzanine level, looking down on all of us, stands Arthur Vance, Julian's father, the chairman of the board. He never mingles. He only observes. I feel his gaze scan the room, cold and appraising, before it settles on me. I meet it. There is no warmth, no celebratory acknowledgement. In the 15 years I have been with his son, he has only ever seen me as a talented assistant, the efficient support staff who wrangled his brilliant, volatile son into a profitable position. The tension between us is a low, familiar hum beneath the string quartet. My eyes drift back to Julian. He has broken away from the investors. He is now in a shadowed alcove, and he is not alone. Serafina Knight. She is young, perhaps 25, and she radiates an effortless vibrancy. She is our newest rising star, a hire in the marketing department whom Julian has taken under his wing for some very specialized mentoring these past 6 months. They are whispering. Her head is tilted, her hand resting lightly on his forearm as she laughs at something he said. A sharp, acidic knot tightens in my stomach. I force myself to look away, to take a sip of champagne I do not want. It is just fatigue. I have been running on fumes for weeks, organizing this gala while simultaneously finalizing the most important project of my life. Tonight is not supposed to be about turning 40. It is supposed to be about the announcement. Later, Julian will take the stage for a speech, and in that speech, he is scheduled to announce Project Chimera, my baby. A revolutionary AI platform I have personally, secretly, developed over the last 2 years. It is a work of genius, a system that will redefine data security and make Vance Dynamics untouchable. Tonight is the night I finally step out from behind the curtain. Tonight, they will have to acknowledge me as the co-founder I truly am. Ilara, you look magnificent, a board member's wife gushes, squeezing my arm. Julian must have an absolutely enormous gift planned for you tonight, to make up for all those insane hours you've been putting in. I give her my practiced, efficient COO smile. He is always full of surprises. I glance back at the alcove. Julian and Serafina are gone. I am not expecting a gift. I am expecting my due. The string quartet faded. A single bright spotlight sliced through the curated darkness, finding Julian on the stage. He flashed his famous, disarming smile, and the entire cavernous room seemed to lean in. "Good evening, everyone," he began, his voice smooth and amplified, wrapping around the glass and steel architecture. "Thank you all for being here, but most of all, I want to thank the woman of the hour, my wife, Ilara." He gestured to me. I felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes. Polite, corporate applause rippled through the guests. I gave my practiced smile, the one that meant all is well, while my heart began a frantic, anxious rhythm against my ribs. This was it. For 15 years, Julian continued, his gaze sweeping the crowd but not landing on me. I have had the privilege of working alongside the most dedicated, the most relentless, the most efficient woman I have ever known. Ilara is the backbone of Vance Dynamics. She is the reason we are all, quite literally, standing in this beautiful room tonight. He let the praise hang in the air, a rare public acknowledgement. It was more than I had heard in years. I felt a small, foolish flush of warmth. And because of her incredible groundwork, her tireless, truly insane hours, Vance Dynamics is ready to take its next great leap. We are on the precipice of a new era. To lead that charge, to shape the very future of our company, I have created a new role, a role that will be the driving force of our innovation for the next decade. The Chief Innovation Officer. My breath hitched. My God, he was actually doing it. This was Chimera. This was my moment. My hand found the arm of my chair, my muscles tensing, preparing to rise as he called my name. I could feel the smiles of the board members at my table. Finally, their expressions said, "Her due." Julian paused, savoring the dramatic tension he so loved. This role requires a new vision, an energy unbound by the past, untethered by the old way of doing things. A cold, sharp pinprick of unease pierced my anticipation. That was not the line we had discussed. His script had just changed. It requires someone who sees the world not as it is, but as it could be. Please join me in welcoming our new Chief Innovation Officer, Serafina Knight. The name, spoken so brightly, so confidently, landed like a physical blow. It punched the air from the room, leaving a vacuum of absolute stunned silence. For 3 full seconds, no one moved, no one breathed. I did not stand. My body, which had been ready to rise, now felt as if it were carved from lead. From the back, a few of Julian's new executive hires began a hesitant, confused clap. It grew, not in enthusiasm, but in obligation, a forced, ragged sound filling the void. Serafina emerged from the wings, dressed in a crimson gown that left nothing to the imagination. She had her hands clasped over her mouth, a perfect, practiced portrait of, "Oh, little old me," shock. She glided onto the stage and wrapped her arms around Julian, a proprietary hug that lingered far too long. The brilliant, warm spotlight that was supposed to be mine now bathed the two of them in a damning, angelic white. And then, Julian looked at me. He looked directly at me, across the expanse of the silent, staring crowd. He lifted his champagne flute, and in his eyes I saw no love, no apology, no shared history. I saw only the cold, hard glint of triumph. "Ilara, my love," he said, his voice carrying over the microphone, silencing the pathetic applause. "You look confused. Don't be." He gestured with his flute toward Serafina, who was now beaming beside him, her hand on his chest. "You should thank her for this gift. Her vision is going to ensure our early retirement." The words hit me, one by one. The public humiliation. The gift was my replacement. The early retirement was my execution. The groundwork he had just praised me for was nothing but a foundation for his mistress to build her throne upon. My gaze snapped, instinctively, up to the mezzanine. Arthur, the hawk. He was still there, a shadow looking down on his kingdom. He saw me look, and he gave Julian the smallest, almost imperceptible nod of approval. A faint, satisfied smile touched his thin lips. This was not just Julian's betrayal. This was a coup, planned, sanctioned, and executed by the Father. The blood in my veins turned to ice. The suffocating weight of the room, the stares, the whispers, all of it pressed down, trying to crack my composure, trying to force the tears they all expected. The tears of the hysterical, scorned wife. I would not give them the satisfaction. Slowly, with a deliberation I did not feel, I rose from my chair. The room was utterly silent again. I picked up my own, untouched glass of champagne. I did not look at the pitying, or horrified, or gleeful faces of our colleagues. I walked 3 steps to the nearest small table, where a low-profile microphone stood for table announcements. I tapped it. The small, sharp thump echoed through the hall. All eyes, including the 2 on stage, swiveled to me. I looked at the stage, at the 2 of them frozen in their spotlight. "Congratulations, Serafina," I said, my voice perfectly clear, perfectly calm. "You've just inherited one hell of a project." I turned my head, just slightly, to lock eyes with the man I had built, the man I had, until 30 seconds ago, called my husband. But there's a problem. Julian. Project Chimera is my intellectual property, not the company's. A flicker of something real panic, of genuine unscripted shock finally crossed his perfect face. "And I resign. Effective immediately." I set my glass down on the table with a quiet, definitive click. I turned, and without looking back, I walked through the center of the grand hall, my posture perfect, my steps measured, past the towering glass sculpture and out the heavy oak double doors, leaving nothing behind me but the sound of my own footsteps in a dead, silent room. The cold night air hit me the second I pushed through the museum's heavy doors. My heels echoed on the granite steps as I walked, fueled by a pure, white-hot adrenaline. I had maintained my dignity. I had not given them the satisfaction of a single tear. I pulled out my personal phone, intending to call a car. A notification banner was already waiting for me at the top of the screen. It was an email from Vance Dynamics Automated Finance. Subject: corporate account status. It read, "Your corporate American Express has been deactivated effective immediately." I hadn't even reached the curb. The speed, the sheer, cold efficiency of it, sent a jolt of real fear through the anger. This was faster than just Julian's malice. I dismissed the first car, the one I'd called with the company app, and hailed a yellow cab, the irony stinging. The ride to the penthouse was silent. I watched the city lights blur, my mind racing. The legal fight for Chimera would be brutal, but I had the original code. The patents were in my name. I would bleed them dry. I entered the lobby of our building. The night doorman nodded. "Good evening, Mrs. Vance." I gave him a tight smile and proceeded to the private elevator. My reflection, captured in the brushed steel doors, was a stranger, a woman in a $4,000 gown, eyes glittering with a dangerous, brittle energy. At the penthouse landing, I pressed my keycard against the private sensor in the elevator. The light flashed red. Access denied. I tried it again. Red. I used the numerical code. The keypad beeped. Invalid code. He had changed the codes. While I was at my own birthday party, he had locked me out of the home I had designed, the home I had paid the down payment for. The panic, the real kind that tightens your chest and steals your breath, began to claw its way up. I leaned against the cool marble wall of the hallway and pulled up my personal banking app, the joint account, our liquid assets, the money I had earned. The balance read $112.40. I scrolled down. A history, a single, massive wire transfer. It had been initiated 2 days ago, scheduled to clear at 9 p.m. this evening, the exact moment Julian was on stage. The destination. A numbered account at a bank in the Cayman Islands I did not recognize. He had emptied everything. My phone buzzed. A new email. Not from finance. This one was from the Vance Dynamics legal department. My own legal department. Subject: notice of legal action and asset freeze. I read the attached PDF, my blood turning to ice. Vance Dynamics versus Alara Vance. They were suing me for breach of fiduciary duty, for violation of my non-compete clause, for And this was the killing blow: grand theft of intellectual property. They were claiming Project Chimera was a company asset I was attempting to steal for my own gain. They were seeking damages and, with an emergency injunction they had clearly filed this afternoon, had successfully frozen all my assets: my personal accounts, my vested company stock, my entire net worth, erased, before I could even process the legal ramifications. Another notification: a Google alert I had set for our company name, a tech gossip blog. The headline was already live: Kyo O. Ilara Vance, fired after psychotic break at private party. My hands were shaking as I clicked the link. Anonymous sources, quotes from an insider who was worried about her increasingly erratic behavior. They were painting me as unstable, jealous, a woman who couldn't handle the pressure, who had a public meltdown when a younger, fresher mind was given a chance. They weren't just ousting me, they were methodically, cruelly, destroying my credibility. I needed my lawyer. I dialed Robert Myers, my personal attorney for over a decade. He picked up on the second ring. Ilara. His voice was cautious. Robert, thank God. They're trying to destroy me. Julian and Arthur. They've frozen everything. They're suing me for Chimera. They're calling it a psychotic break. There was a long, terrible silence on the line. Robert, Ilara, he said, his voice flat and dead. I received a retainer agreement from Vance Dynamics an hour ago. They are retaining my firm for corporate oversight regarding the Chimera IP dispute. That's a conflict of interest. You can't. It creates a conflict of interest? Yes, he said. His voice clipped. Which means I cannot represent you. I cannot advise you. I'm sorry. He hung up. They had anticipated my every move. They hadn't just predicted I would call him. They had bought him first. I was in shock, desperate. There was one last person, Mark Landon, my vice president of engineering, my protege. We had pulled all-nighters on Chimera. He knew the code was mine. I fled the building, my expensive heels clattering on the pavement. I hailed another cab, my last one, promising the driver I would get cash from the ATM. I pounded on his apartment door. Mark, it's Ilara, please. You have to help me. The door opened a crack. The security chain was engaged. I could see his eye, wide and terrified. Ilara, you can't be here. You shouldn't be here. Mark, they've locked me out. They've taken everything. They're saying Chimera is theirs. You know the truth. I just need the original server logs, the ones we kept off-site. I'm sorry, Ilara, he whispered, his gaze darting past me to the empty hallway. I have a family. I have a mortgage. I don't know what you're talking about. Mark, please, I begged, the word tasting like acid. They already called me, he said, his voice shaking. They warned me you might get confused, that you might try to contact me. He shut the door. The sound of the deadbolt sliding into place was the final, definitive click. I stood in the sterile hallway of his building, locked out of my home, my money gone, my reputation shattered, my allies turned. I had nothing but the $1,000 dress on my back and a personal phone with its battery now flashing a critical 10%. I finally understood. The wire transfer initiated days ago. The pre-written press release, the precision-timed lawsuit, the strategic conflict of interest. This wasn't Julian's impulsive, sloppy betrayal. This was a purge. It was surgical, meticulous, and planned to the minute. This was all Arthur. I stood on the wet pavement, the mist from the Puget Sound clinging to my expensive gown. My phone screen was black. The battery was dead. I had used its last fading gasp of power to call one more car, inputting a credit card I prayed hadn't been flagged and frozen yet, a card Julian didn't know about. The car had taken me far from the glass towers and waterfront penthouses, deep into the old part of Seattle, the part with cobblestone streets, brick facades, and the lingering smell of damp paper and coffee. I stood in front of a narrow 3-story building. The ground floor was a used bookstore, its windows crammed with yellowing paperbacks, the lights long since extinguished. I pressed the buzzer for the top floor. A long, screeching tone answered, and the lock on the front door clicked open. The stairs were narrow, wooden, and smelled of dust and old wiring. I climbed, the silk of my party dress dragging on the gritty steps. The attic apartment at the top was small, the door slightly ajar, casting a sliver of warm, yellow light into the dark landing. His name was Marcus Reed. He was the brother of Dr. Evelyn Reed. Evelyn had been my mentor, my first boss, the woman who had plucked me from graduate school. She was the quiet, eccentric, terrifyingly brilliant mind who had written the original core algorithm that Vance Dynamics was built on. Evelyn was the company's true founder, a fact Arthur and Julian had systematically erased from our official history. Evelyn had died 5 years ago, just before the IPO, just before the company became the behemoth it was now. The official cause was a massive, stress-induced stroke. She was only 45. Marcus, her brother, was a data scientist of equal, if not greater, brilliance. But he was a social outcast, a man who saw patterns in everything and trusted no one. He had spent the last 5 years telling anyone who would listen, and no one would, that Arthur Vance had murdered his sister. Not literally, he'd say, but by working her to death, by stealing her research, by systematically breaking her mind. He was dismissed as a grieving, paranoid crank. I pushed the door open. He was sitting in a worn armchair, surrounded by towers of books and blinking, dismantled server components. He wore an old, frayed bathrobe. He didn't stand. He just looked at me, his gaze traveling from my diamond earrings down to the ruined hem of my gown, to the tear in the silk I hadn't even noticed. He didn't seem to care that the COO of Vance Dynamics, a woman he despised by association, was standing in his doorway at midnight like a refugee from a fairy tale. He took a slow sip from a mug. He finally did to you what he did to Evelyn. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact. The dam of adrenaline and icy resolve that had held me together finally, catastrophically, broke. It wasn't a sob. It was a dry, gasping sound. I told him everything, the party, the speech, Serafina, the locked doors, the empty accounts, the lawsuit, the smear campaign, the betrayal by Robert and Mark, the entire meticulous purge. He listened, his expression unchanged, no shock, no pity. Just a kind of grim, tired acknowledgement. "Of course," he said, when I was finished. "That's how he operates." He gestured to a rickety stool. I sat. Evelyn knew what they were, he said, staring at a complex line of code on one of his 3 monitors. She was brilliant, but she was naive, like you. She thought genius and hard work were enough. She thought the algorithm would protect her. He snorted. The Vances don't respect genius. They only respect leverage. He turned in his chair. She always said Arthur kept a separate moral ledger, one for the public and one for what he actually did in the dark. I just stared at him, my mind hollowed out. He's taken everything, Marcus. He took all my proof, the code for Chimera, my stocks, my allies. I have nothing left. No, Marcus said, his voice quiet. He stood up and walked to a cluttered desk. He rummaged in a drawer filled with loose wires and memory sticks. He pulled out a single, old-fashioned brass skeleton key tied to a faded luggage tag. He tossed it to me. I caught it out of reflex. Evelyn wasn't entirely naive. Not at the end, he said. She started paying for a private office. Off the books. Cash. A place even I didn't know about until after her funeral, when I found the payment receipts. She called it her insurance. He nodded at the key in my hand. I was never able to find the locket opened. I never went in. But I think she left it for you. Maybe you should. The address on the faded luggage tag was just a few blocks away, in a commercial strip of failing tech shops and takeout restaurants. It led to a dingy, narrow staircase sandwiched between a computer repair store and a nail salon, The door at the top was unmarked, cheap brown metal, but the old brass key slid into the lock with a satisfying, oily click. The room was not an office. It was a storage closet. 10 feet by 10 feet, windowless, smelling of ozone, dust, and old plastic. Against the back wall sat a single humming piece of equipment, a black, unmarked server tower, thick with dust. It was an old model, but a powerful one. It was also, I noted, completely air-gapped. It had no connection to the outside world, no way to be accessed or wiped remotely. This was Evelyn's insurance. I dragged the stool over, my gown bunching around my ankles. I found a monitor and keyboard tucked under the rack, plugged them in, and hit the power button. The machine whirred to life with a high, whining sound. It booted not into a standard OS, but into a command line interface. A password prompt. I typed in the name of her cat. Access denied. Her mother's maiden name. Access denied. Her birthday. Access denied. I stopped, thinking. What was her passion? What did she call her life's work? I typed, the core algorithm V1. Access granted. Thus. The file structure was simple, archaic, but organized with Evelyn's meticulous logic. I found her original research, the raw, uncompiled code for the algorithm that had made us all millionaires. It was more beautiful than I even remembered. Seeing it felt like finding a diary. It was the proof I needed that the core IP was hers, and by extension, mine by lineage, not the company's. But a lawsuit about patents would take years, and I had no money for a retainer. This wasn't enough. I needed the leverage Marcus had mentioned. I kept digging. Most of the directories were technical notes, iterations of code, old academic papers, but one folder, at the bottom of the list, was different. It had only one file in it. The folder was named Pandora. I tried to open the file. It was encrypted. This time, the password prompt was just a blinking cursor. I tried a dozen of her old passwords. Nothing. I sat back, the little room suddenly feeling impossibly hot and small. What would she use? What was Arthur's moral ledger? I typed in a new phrase. Moral ledger. The file unzipped. It was not a journal. It was not a diary. It was an accounting spreadsheet, a parallel ledger, running parallel to the official, audited books of Vance Dynamics. My stomach clenched. This was it. It detailed a second hidden revenue stream. For the last 6 years, Vance Dynamics had been systematically siphoning off raw, non-anonymized user data names, addresses, browsing habits, private messages, and selling it, not to advertisers, which was legally gray, but to third-party data brokers, the kind who specialized in political clients. It was a violation of hundreds of international privacy laws, a breach of every term of service we had ever published. The amounts were staggering. Hundreds of millions of dollars funneled through shell corporations. I scrolled to find the biggest buyer. It was a name I recognized, a shadowy political action conglomerate based in Washington, D.C., one known for its aggressive, targeted disinformation campaigns. We weren't just violating privacy, we were enabling the poisoning of the public discourse, all for profit. This was Arthur's real business. I was about to close the file, my mind reeling with the sheer criminality, when my eye caught the first entry, the origin contract. The deal that had started this entire treasonous revenue stream, dated 6 years ago. It was a small test sale, just $50,000, but the contract had to be signed by a Vance employee. It was countersigned by the data broker, and the signature for Vance Dynamics. My blood ran cold. It was not Arthur. It was not Julian. It was not a single one of the senior executives. The signature was clear, if a little naive and looping. Serafina Knight. I checked the date again. 6 years ago, Serafina would have been an intern. A 19-year-old marketing intern. It all clicked into place. A horrible, perfect picture. She wasn't a rising star. She was an insurance policy. Arthur had found a young, ambitious, morally flexible intern and used her as a cutout, a deniable signature on the company's original sin. If the deal ever went bad, she would be the firewall, the foolish, low-level employee who went to jail. But she didn't go to jail. The money kept flowing. And Serafina, the intern who knew where the first body was buried, had parlayed that one signature into a career. Her promotion wasn't talent. Her mentorship with Julian wasn't an affair. It was control. Arthur had to keep his co-conspirator close, happy, and leashed. My God, Julian wasn't just cheating on me with her. He was trapped. Maybe he was blackmailed by her, or maybe they were both blackmailed by Arthur. It didn't matter. The entire grotesque public display at the party wasn't just to replace me. It was to pay Serafina off, to give her the one thing she demanded, to buy her silence by giving her my crown, and they had just handed me the sword to take it all back. I spent the next hour in that small, airless room, methodically copying the entire contents of Evelyn's server onto a single, encrypted high-capacity thumb drive. I did not, for a second, believe I was the first person to find this. Arthur was too meticulous. But Evelyn had been smarter. She hadn't left this for just anyone. She had left it for me, and she had trusted I would know the password. I had the ledger, I had the contracts, I had the signature, I had leverage, but I was still a refugee in a party dress. Leverage is only useful if you can apply it. Going to the press was an option, but a messy one. A he said, she said fight with a tech giant. Especially after they had just painted me as unstable. I needed an official, undeniable weapon. I needed the government. There was only one person I knew who could navigate that world, who I still believed was beyond Arthur's reach. David Morrison. He had been a senior partner at my old law firm, Robert Myers's firm, but he was a different breed. He was old money, old morals, a man who had retired 2 years ago, disgusted with what he called the moral rot of the new tech industry. He had always had a soft spot for me, and he had loathed Arthur Vance, even when he was cashing his checks. I found a burner phone at a 24-hour convenience store, using the last of my cash. I called him. David, it's Alara Vance. I need your help. It's not what you think. It's criminal. I met him an hour later, at 5 a.m, at a drab, all-night diner. I had changed in Marcus's bathroom into a pair of old jeans and a sweatshirt he had found for me. My hair scraped back. I must have looked insane. He just looked tired and old, wrapped in a cashmere coat. I didn't give him the drive. I told him what I had found. I didn't mention Serafina's name. I focused on the core crime, the systemic, illegal sale of non-anonymized data to political operators. I gave him the name of the D.C. firm. His reaction was exactly what I had hoped for. His face, pale in the fluorescent light, tightened with a kind of righteous patrician fury. Arthur, he breathed. I always knew he was a viper. I never imagined he was a traitor. David, they've already painted me as a lunatic, I said, my voice low and urgent. They've locked me out of everything. I can't go to the local police. This is bigger than them. I need someone at the Department of Justice. Someone real, who can't be bought. He nodded, his mind already working. Yes, you're right. I know a few people. The Deputy Attorney General. We were at Yale together. This is precisely the kind of thing he lives for. He placed a reassuring, papery hand on my arm. You did the right thing, Alara. This is the end of Arthur Vance. He told me to go back to my safe house. Stay there. Don't talk to anyone. Don't even use your phone. I will make 2 calls. I will come find you when it's safe to move. I left that diner feeling the first, real, thawing breath of hope. I had done it. I had found the path. I had a champion. Meanwhile, David Morrison sat in his car, his coat still on. He watched me round the corner. Then he pulled out his own phone and dialed a single number on his speed dial. A private line. Arthur, he said, his voice no longer full of outrage, but of quiet, collegial concern. We have a problem. She's found the ledger. Not a copy. I think it's the original Pandora file. Yes. Yes, she's at the brother's place. No. I told her I'd handle it. I told her to wait for my call. It should buy you at least 12 hours. But, Arthur, my consulting fee just doubled. I walked the 30 blocks back to Marcus's apartment, my mind already planning my testimony. I was so focused. I didn't see the black van parked across the street from the bookstore, the one with no markings. I buzzed. No answer. Marcus, it's me, I called. Nothing. A jolt of panic. The same I'd felt at the elevator shot through me. I used the building key he had given me. The door to his apartment was open, not just unlocked, it was splintered, the frame broken. Marcus. I stepped inside. The apartment had been turned upside down. It wasn't just a robbery. It wasn't just a search. It was a demolition. His towers of books were thrown, his monitors smashed, his components scattered like the guts of an animal. It was a message, and in the small, dark kitchen, I saw him. Marcus. He was on the floor, groaning, a nasty gash above his eye. Marcus. Oh my God. I rushed to him. The server, he mumbled, clutching his head. They were professionals. 2 of them. They didn't ask for money. They just kept asking, "Where is it? Where is the insurance?" I ran, stumbling over the debris, down the stairs to the narrow, unmarked door. The metal was bent, the cheap lock shattered. I pushed it open. The small, 10 by 10 room was empty. The server rack was still there. But the machine itself, Evelyn's humming black tower of secrets, was gone. They knew. My visit to David Morrison hadn't been a plea for help. It had been a confession. It had been a signal. And he had dispatched his cleanup crew. I had not only failed to get help, I had led them right to my only remaining ally, and I had just handed them my only piece of evidence. I got Marcus off the floor. His head was bleeding, but his pride was what was truly wounded. We couldn't stay. The apartment, the building, this whole neighborhood was burned. They had been thorough. They had been professional. We grabbed his coat, the burner phone, and my purse, which now contained the single most important object on earth, the small thumb drive I had copied in Evelyn's office. We walked until my feet, still in the delicate, ruined silk heels from the party, were bleeding. We found a bus and rode it to the end of the line, then took another one. We ended up in a $20 a night motel by the airport, a place of transient souls and industrial carpet, paid for with the last of my cash. I bought a first aid kit and a bottle of cheap whiskey from the vending machine in the lobby. I sat on the lumpy bed, cleaning the gash above Marcus's eye, the reality finally settling in. "It's over," I whispered, my voice hollow. "I led them right to you. I led them to the server. Morrison played me, and I walked right into it. They've won. They have the only proof." Marcus, who had been wincing as I dabbed the antiseptic, suddenly laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound. "You," he said, "are just like her. So smart, but you still don't get it." "Get what, Marcus?" "They took the server. They took a server," he said, his voice full of a sudden sharp energy. "My sister, Evelyn, she was brilliant, yes, but more than that, she was paranoid. Clinically. She saw patterns in everything. She saw Arthur Vance for exactly what he was from day one. You don't build a fortress with one wall." He leaned forward, his eyes bright. "Evelyn didn't make one copy. She always made 3. I stopped dabbing. 3-1, he said, ticking a finger in the air. The server in the closet, the honey pot, the one she wanted them to find, the one that was just hard enough to access to make them feel like they'd won. 2. He bent down, wincing, and pulled off his old, cracked leather boot. He twisted the heel. It came off in his hand, revealing a small, custom-cut hollow. Tucked inside was a tiny military-grade encrypted hard drive. My copy, the one she gave me the day before she died. She said, "Don't open this. Just keep it in your shoe." I never looked at it. I don't even know the password. I stared at the drive. Hope, a dangerous, sharp-edged thing, cut through the despair. And the third, the consignment, he said, putting the heel back on. A dead man's switch. She set it up with a third party. If she failed to check in, or if her vitals stopped and yes, she had a biometric tracker, a package would be sent. I don't know where it is. I don't know who has it. But it's out there. So, no. Alara. They didn't take everything. My burner phone, plugged into the wall, vibrated. It wasn't a call. A new app, one I hadn't installed, flashed on the screen. A secure, encrypted messenger. A single message from a user named Kira7. It said, "I wrote the smear article on you. They fed me the sources. I saw the footage of your resignation. Now I believe you. I hate them more than I fear them. Meet me." "It's a trap," Marcus said, reading over my shoulder. "Arthur is cleaning up loose ends. He's trying to find you." Maybe. But the phrasing, "I hate them more than I fear them." It felt real. It was the only currency I had left. "Stay here. Lock this door. Don't open it for anyone but me." The meet was at a crowded train station. I felt exposed, my face now notorious. I spotted her. She was young, maybe 24, with bright green hair and a laptop bag covered in anti-corporate stickers. Kira Lawson, a journalist, or more accurately, a blogger. One who had been trying to get a spade in the ground on Vance Dynamics for a year. Her articles were always just shy of libel, and I had personally shut her down twice. She walked right up to me. "You look like hell." "You wrote that I had a psychotic break," I countered. "Touché," she said, not apologizing. "Arthur Vance's office called me, offered me an exclusive, the real story of the brilliant new CIO, Serafina Knight, and the tragic, unstable COO she was replacing. They gave me the entire package. They used me to twist the knife." "And you did it," I said. "Yes," she said, her voice hard. "And I regretted it the second I hit publish. I'm ambitious, Mrs. Vance, but I'm not. One of them. I'm here because I'm burning that bridge. I want them to pay." "They've already won. Kira. They have my money, my reputation. They just stole the last of my evidence." "So, we get new evidence," Kira said, her eyes flashing with a reckless energy. "That's why I called you. They aren't just replacing you. They're accelerating. They've gotten arrogant. They're making a big, stupid move." She pulled up a schedule on her phone. "The Innovate North Tech Summit. In 2 days. It's the biggest tech event in the Pacific Northwest. Serafina Knight is now a keynote speaker. And I have a source on the inside who says she's not just giving a speech, she's holding a private meeting, just after, to finalize a massive data-sharing deal." "A deal with who?" I asked, my blood running cold. Kira smiled, a thin, sharp smile. "Your old friends, the DC political group. They're not just selling old data, Alara. They're about to sell them Project Chimera." I stared at her. They weren't just taking my legacy. They were weaponizing it, and they were doing it out in the open, convinced I was a broken, penniless woman hiding in the shadows. "That's not just a meeting," I said. "That's a trap. It's the perfect trap." We huddled around Kira's laptop, which was now our command center, in the dim, stale light of the motel room. The air was thick with the smell of cheap coffee and conspiracy. I had plugged in the small, military-grade drive from Marcus's boot. The machine recognized it, but the contents were a solid, impenetrable block of encryption. "Okay, so what's the password?" Kira asked, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "She told me to hold it, not to open it," Marcus said, pacing the tiny room. "She never gave me a password." "It has to be something," I insisted, my mind racing. Evelyn was meticulous. She left a trail. The server password was the core, algorithm V1. The ledger was moral ledger. She was leaving a story. I looked at Marcus. "What were her last words to you? What did you talk about?" Marcus stopped pacing. He stared at the wall, his eyes unfocused, traveling back 5 years. We had a fight. I told her she was killing herself for a man who despised her. I told her Arthur was a monster. She looked so tired. She said, "I know, but I've already signed my own death warrant. I just need to make sure it's countersigned." My blood went cold. "Kira, type it in. Countersigned." Kira's fingers flew. The cursor blinked. A progress bar appeared. The drive was decrypting. The file structure that loaded onto the screen was identical to the server's, the core algorithm, the research, and the Pandora folder. I clicked it. The same password. Moral ledger. The same spreadsheet opened, detailing the years of criminal data sales. "This is great," Kira said, her voice tight with excitement. "We have it back. We have the proof." "But it's the same proof," I said, my heart sinking. "We're in the same position. It's my word against Arthur's. He'll just say I faked it." "No," Marcus said, pointing at the screen. He was staring at the file list. "Not identical. Look." He was right. On the server, there had been 7 directories. Here, there were 8. A new folder. One I had absolutely missed, or one that had been deliberately scrubbed from the honeypot server. It was labeled Health Assessment. "What is that?" Kira asked, leaning in. "Evelyn," Marcus whispered. "She was a hypochondriac, but she was also meticulous. She recorded everything, her heart rate, her food intake, her meetings." My hand was shaking as I double-clicked the folder. It was filled with audio files, dozens of them, labeled by date. Meeting with AV, Q1 projections. Julian, code review. AV, budget concerns. We played the first few. They were mundane, just as he'd said. The sounds of a corporate boardroom. Evelyn's sharp, precise voice arguing for more R&D funding. Julian's charming, non-committal agreements. Arthur's dismissive, gravelly tone. Then we came to the last file, dated the day before her death. The file name was just Final. I pressed play. The audio was clear. It was just 3 people, Evelyn, Arthur, and Julian. Evelyn's voice, "And the trace logs don't lie. Arthur, you're selling raw data. You're selling our users. This isn't a projection. This is a crime." Arthur's voice, calm, almost amused. "A crime." "Oh, Evelyn, don't be so dramatic. It's commerce. It's the future." Evelyn, "I am reporting this. I am going to the board, and I am going to the SEC. It's over." There was a pause. Then, Arthur's voice, colder than I had ever heard it. "You think you can stop me? You think your little algorithm gives you power. You've always been too smart for your own good. Evelyn." A shuffling sound. The scrape of a chair. The click of a porcelain cup on a saucer. Evelyn. "What? What is this? I need some water." Then, a cough. A sharp, wheezing gasp. "Evelyn!" It was Julian's voice, small and panicked. The coughing became violent, choking, a desperate, terrifying sound. A fight for air. Evelyn was allergic, Marcus whispered, his face ashen, his eyes wide with a dawning, 5-year-old horror. A severe anaphylactic allergy to tree nuts, specifically hazelnuts. I stared at the laptop. Arthur, the cup of coffee, the sound of a man who knew he had his victim trapped, 10 floors up, in his private office. On the recording, Evelyn's voice was a strained, suffocating gasp. You put in my... The sound was unbearable. And then, Arthur's voice cut through it, smooth, calm, and utterly monstrous. "My secretary will call 911 in about, 10 minutes. A tragedy. A stress-induced stroke. I'm afraid. It's such a terrible, terrible shame. Isn't it? Julian." A new sound. Julian's voice, not in protest, not in defiance, but the unmistakable, wretched sound of him turning away and vomiting, violently, into a wastebasket. The recording clicked off. The motel room was silent. Kira was staring, her hand over her mouth. Marcus was shaking, tears silently streaming down his face. He murdered her. He sat there and listened to her die. This was never about a job. This wasn't about a company, or money, or an affair. This wasn't a corporate purge. This was a murder, and they had just, finally, signed my death warrant, too. The silence in the motel room was no longer one of despair. It was the silence of a tomb. And then, the silence of a war room. The whiskey bottle sat untouched. The first aid kit was packed away. The grief for Evelyn, sharp and bright, had calcified into a purpose so cold and hard it felt like a new spine had been installed in my back. This was no longer about my career, my money, or even my husband's betrayal. This was for Evelyn. This was an execution. The Innovate North Summit, Kira said, her laptop open, her voice low and rapid. It's in 48 hours. The keynote speaker for the final day, the one receiving the big Ethics in AI award, is Arthur Vance. The irony was so profound, so grotesque, it was almost poetic. He's getting an award for ethics, I said, the words tasting like ash. It's the perfect stage, Kira said, her eyes glittering. The entire global tech press will be in there, live streamed. She held up her press pass. I'm credentialed, and I'm allowed one technical assistant to help with my live blogging equipment. She looked at me. You're my assistant. They'll have security, Marcus said, his voice rough. They'll be looking for her face. Then I'll change my face, I said. The next 36 hours were a blur of meticulous, focused preparation. We were no longer victims. We were insurgents. Kira took me to a 24-hour drugstore. I bought a box of cheap, harsh black hair dye, a pair of scissors, and a pair of non-prescription, heavy-framed glasses. In the cracked mirror of the motel bathroom, I sheared off the long, polished hair Julian had always said he loved. I cut it short, jagged, and unrecognizable. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, her eyes hard and cold. While I transformed my appearance, Marcus and Kira worked on the weapons. Marcus, now fully in his element, was hunched over Kira's laptop, his fingers flying. He called it the fireworks. We can't just leak the audio, I said, my voice muffled from the bathroom. They'll deny it. They'll say it's a deep fake, an AI construct. That's the lie they're already priming. They'll use my own field against me. Oh, we're not just going to leak it, Marcus said, not looking up. We're going to use his system to crucify him. We're not just going to tell the story. We're going to play the tape. I knew what he meant. The Innovate North Summit's presentation and AV backend. I knew it because I had designed it. 3 years ago, as a pro bono favor to the tech community, Vance Dynamics had built their entire presentation architecture. I had personally overseen the project. I knew every line of code, every open port, every back door. For the next day, I sat with Marcus and we built the worm. It was small, elegant, and vicious. A piece of code that would piggyback on Kira's live blogging connection, burrow into the main presentation server, and lie dormant. It would wait, listening. Arthur, in his arrogance, would be reading from a preloaded script on the teleprompter. We just had to find the trigger. Kira found it. She had a source who had seen the draft of Arthur's acceptance speech. Here it is, she said, pointing to the screen. The final sanctimonious line before he accepts the award. The future of data is the future of trust. That's it, I whispered. The worm activates on that audio cue, but it doesn't just play the recording. It has to be bigger. It will be, Marcus said. He coded it to do 2 things. First, to hijack every screen in the auditorium, replacing Arthur's Ethics in AI slide with the Pandora ledger. Second, to broadcast the audio file final. Evelyn's murder not just through the auditorium PA, but to every live stream feed, hard coding it into the outgoing signal. It couldn't be shut down from the booth. By the time they cut the power to the building, it would be too late. The night before the summit, Kira went to a pre-conference networking party. She came back to the motel just after midnight, her face pale. "They're there," she said, pouring herself a glass of water, her hand shaking. "Julian and Serafina. They're disgusting. Holding court. He's got his arm around her. They're laughing. Everyone is congratulating them. They believe you're gone. Defeated. Irrelevant." "Good," I said, checking the final lines of the trigger code. "No," Kira said, her voice soft. "You don't understand." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a new, personal anger. "She's wearing a necklace, a silver locket, an antique." I froze. I didn't have to see it. I knew it. A small Art Nouveau locket I had found in a small shop in Paris. My gift to Julian on our 5th anniversary. The one I had cried over. The one I had told him was the most beautiful personal thing I had ever owned. He had given my memory to his mistress. The final petty desecration. I closed the laptop. "Kira," I said, my voice perfectly level. "You have your question ready for the Q&A." "Yes," she said, her own voice hardening. "It's loaded." "Good," I said, turning off the single lamp in the motel room. "Let's go get justice for Evelyn." The auditorium was a sea of expectant faces, a sold-out theater of the tech elite. I stood in the darkness of the audio-visual booth, high above the stage, my new, jagged black hair a cowl around my face. I was just a technician, another face in the shadows. Kira was in the 3rd row, center aisle, her press pass visible, her phone set to record. Marcus was 2 blocks away, in a coffee shop, monitoring the global live stream, our fireworks specialist. The applause was thunderous as Arthur Vance, the patriarch, the king, walked onto the stage. He looked polished, powerful, and utterly at ease. The massive 30-foot screen behind him glowed with the Innovate North logo. He stepped up to the podium, arranged his notes, and beamed at the crowd. Thank you," he began, his voice dripping with false humility. What a privilege. To be here, among you, the architects of our new world. We are at a crossroads, a time of immense power, and therefore a time of immense responsibility. I watched him, my hand on the audio output controls. He was a master, weaving a narrative of integrity and care, all while being a murderer and a thief. We at Advanced Dynamics believe in transparency, he continued, his gaze sweeping the front rows, where Serafina and Julian sat, glowing with pride. We believe in accountability, because we know, more than anyone, that— He paused, leaning into the microphone for his grand, concluding line. The future of data is the future of trust. The trigger. I let my finger hover, but the worm was already active. On the massive screen behind Arthur, the Innovate North logo did not just disappear, it tore. It glitched, and in its place, a black and white spreadsheet snapped into view. The Pandora ledger, column after column. The dates of illegal sales. The names of the shell companies, and at the very top, the name of the D.C. political firm. Arthur faltered. He hadn't seen it yet, but the teleprompter, which my worm had also infected, had just frozen on his trigger line. He turned, looked at the screen, and his smile tightened. "Ah," he said, trying to laugh it off. "It seems we have a small technical glitch, a ghost in the machine, as it were." But it was too late. The front rows, filled with the sharpest tech journalists in the world, were not laughing. They were reading. Phones were already up, cameras flashing, recording the spreadsheet. I could see the exact moment the press corps realized what they were looking at. "And now, a brief Q&A, the moderator said, trying to regain control. Kira Lawson stood up. Her voice was sharp and clear. No microphone needed. Mr. Vance Kira Lawson, tech burst. Can you comment on Pandora's box? Arthur's face, which had been confused, now hardened. He recognized the name. I'm sorry, young lady. I don't know what you're... Then let me refresh your memory, I said, my voice quiet in the booth. I unmuted the audio channel and hit play. Silence. And then, Evelyn's voice, thin and digital, filled the auditorium. I am going to the SEC. It's over. Arthur's voice, amused. You think you can stop me? The gasps from the crowd were audible. Arthur's eyes, wide with sudden primal terror, scanned for the source. Then, the cough, the wheezing, the horrible, wet sound of a human being suffocating. What is that? Someone in the front row shouted. In the second row, Serafina had gone white, her hand flying to the locket. Julian was frozen, his face a mask of sick recognition. The audio played on. Evelyn's gasp. You put... And then, Arthur's voice, the voice of a god passing judgment, echoed through the theater, through the live stream, to the entire world. My secretary will call 911 in about, 10 minutes. A tragedy. A stress-induced stroke. I'm afraid. It's such a terrible, terrible shame, isn't it, Julian? A scream. Not from the crowd, but from the stage. Serafina Knight, realizing in that instant that she was not just an accomplice to fraud but to a murder, leaped from her seat. She scrambled onto the stage, past the frozen moderator, and grabbed a live microphone. I didn't know, she shrieked, her voice cracking, the locket swinging wildly. I didn't know about that. He told me she just retired. It was him, Julian. Julian told me he was there. He told me it was just a retirement. Julian, his face the color of old paper, finally broke. He stood, turned, and made a blind run for the stage exit. But the security I had seen earlier was not conference security. As Kira had made the call to the FBI's cybercrimes division an hour ago, 2 men in dark suits stepped out from the wings, blocking his path. On the stage, Arthur Vance did not move. He did not run. He just stood at the podium, a man of ice, as the audio of his protégé vomiting in the background played. He stared out at the crowd, at the flashing cameras, at the agents now walking, calmly, onto the stage toward him. He had been so convinced of his power that he never saw the true weapon he had forged. I stood in the darkness of the booth, watching the king being dethroned under the harsh, bright lights. I watched them put his hands behind his back. I watched it all, live and in real time, as the monster who had taken everything from me was finally and irrevocably exposed. Thank you so much for listening to this story. Please let me know where you are listening from in the comments so we can connect and share our thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and give us extra support by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.